I could feel the heat rising from the dock before I even reached the security gate. Charleston was doing what it did best: sunlight sharp as judgment, air heavy with salt and old money. My blazer stuck slightly at the elbows, not from sweat, but from the way tension tends to cling when you know you're walking into a lion's den without a whip. I adjusted my cuffs and glanced down at the shoes. Soft brown leather, slightly scuffed at the toes, but still solid, still mine. They'd walked me through courtrooms, board meetings, and lonely hotel lobbies after signing million-dollar deals. But I had a feeling they wouldn't survive this dock without being noticed. The yacht club hadn't changed. White uniforms, manicured smiles, the quiet smugness of people who believed nothing outside their zip code really mattered. I stepped into the entrance lane where the red carpet curved along the polished marble, a velvet rope cutting off those who didn't belong. And right there, poised like a man auditioning for a role he already thought he owned, stood Rolver Stratton. Eularia. He said my name like it tasted foreign. I nodded. Rolver. He looked me over like he was scanning a bad credit score. His gaze paused at my shoes. Listen, he said with a smile that wouldn't make it past a TSA check. We're trying to maintain a certain look tonight. Optics matter, you know. I blinked once. You're telling me my look's a problem? He leaned in, voice lower now, the edge unmistakable. Those shoes shame this family. The words landed soft but cut sharp. I could feel it, not just in my gut, but in the shift of nearby conversations, the way two guests suddenly turned their heads, curiosity gleaming behind their sunglasses. You can't come on board looking like that, he added, louder. A woman in pearls leaned toward her date. Isn't that her? She whispered, not quietly enough. I thought she lived out west doing tech charity stuff. I didn't flinch. I've dealt with billionaires who had no idea how to shake a hand properly. This was nothing new. But it still stung. Inside, I was weighing my options. Do I argue? Do I smile and walk away? Or do I remind him of who signed the original licensing agreement that allowed his wife, my sister, to use the Kincaid Foundation branding? But my father's voice echoed in my mind, old and exhausted. Don't make a scene, Eularia. You're not like them. And maybe that was the point. I took a breath. You might want to check the guest list again. That's when Cimbria appeared. Glossy, radiant, wearing the kind of smile that could land her a cosmetics deal. She barely looked at me. Oh no, she said, almost sweetly. There must have been a miscommunication. I thought you weren't attending. Rolver stepped forward, gesturing to a nearby server. Can we escort Mrs. Kincaid back to the valet? The server hesitated, eyes darting between us. I looked at him directly. You don't need to touch me. Then to Rolver. You just made your last mistake. His mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. He didn't need to. The damage was done. And for them, that was enough. I turned slowly, giving the crowd a full view of the woman they thought didn't measure up. My shoes clicked on the stone, each step louder than the last. Someone murmured behind me, "Old money doesn't look like that." And I nearly laughed. Of course it didn't. Because real legacy isn't what you wear. It's what you build when no one's watching. As I reached the end of the dock, just before stepping onto the hot pavement, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my blazer, thumb hovering over the screen. Caller ID, Captain Verrill, Dock B. The message was brief, to the point. Ms. Kincaid, are you arriving soon? The main deck team is waiting. My lips curved into a smile so small, it could have been mistaken for forgiveness. I didn't need an invitation. I owned the ship. I didn't look back as I walked away from the dock. My heels struck the wooden boards with a slow, deliberate rhythm, an accidental metronome to the silence that surrounded me. I was hoping, maybe stupidly, that someone would stop me, that a cousin might call out, or my sister would at least follow, maybe whisper something lame like, "Wait, Ul, don't take it the wrong way." But no one did. Not a single voice called after me. The valet stood by awkwardly, not sure whether to open my door or apologize. He didn't know I was the one who paid for last year's holiday bonus for the club's staff. I gave him a tight smile, slid into the car, and drove off without a word. Halfway across the bridge, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen, half hoping it was Cimbria. It wasn't. Mom. Don't blame them. You've never really understood the place you were born into. I pulled off at the next turnout. My hands gripped the steering wheel as if letting go would make me explode. The place I was born into. It echoed like a snide whisper in a family portrait. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Instead, I opened my purse, pulled out the envelope that had been sitting there all week, and laid it flat across my lap. The invitation was handwritten. Guest. No seat number, no table assignment, just an address and a time. Flashback. 3 days ago, I found the envelope tucked between the electric bill and a charity request from the animal rescue. Cimbria had mailed it herself. No note. Just my name on the front. Not Eularia, not Dr. Kincaid. Just Sis. I traced the gold ink with my finger now, thinking, how convenient to be an afterthought. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. I passed the cafes and shops of downtown Charleston, the tourists in linen and sundresses who had no idea what had just happened a mile away. By the time I stepped into my home, the numbness had hardened into clarity. I took off my blazer, hung it neatly, and walked straight to the wall beside my desk. Framed thank you letters, hand-drawn crayon sketches from kids in Arkansas and Detroit, clippings from community blogs that had featured our work at sea. Foundation. To them, I whispered, I'm a family embarrassment. But to strangers, I'm a damn lifeline. I stared at one letter longer than the rest. A girl named Liana had written, Miss Kincaid, I used your donated laptop to apply to every college on my list. I got into 4. I could have drowned in that moment, but instead I reached for the old file box under my desk, labeled in thick black Sharpie, Contingency, Brand Authority. Inside, I pulled out a folder marked Stratton PR, Misuse. The tabs were clean, alphabetized. I wasn't planning revenge. I was protecting what I built. One page caught my eye, an invoice for a campaign that included my foundation's name in a press release for a startup I never authorized. I had proof, receipts. The problem wasn't if I'd act, but when. I opened my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. I logged into our internal portal, ran a search for anything connected to Stratton PR. There it was. Internal alert. Unauthorized use of C Foundation logo in promotional material. Stratton PR Group. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The cursor blinked like a dare. Then I leaned forward, lips curling into a slow, measured smile. They wanted me invisible. But I was about to become unforgettable. The folder sat on my lap like it weighed more than it should. Same font, same header. But the name next to Chief Executive wasn't mine. 3 years ago, I signed that transfer contract. Temporary, they said. Just a placeholder while Cimbria's company got on its feet. I told myself it didn't matter, that titles were just titles. I still ran the meetings. I still built the platforms. And yet, sitting in my apartment now with that folder cracked open, I realized I'd been writing my own erasure line by line. Back then, it had all started over dinner. The Kincaid estate always looked like a museum after sunset. The table was long, the wine older than I was, and my parents sat at either end like executives at a quarterly review. I remember the way Dad laid the contract between us like it was just another course in the meal. It's a formality, he said. You'll still be involved. Just behind the scenes, while Cimbria handles the press. Cimbria nodded like she was trying not to smile too wide. Rolver sat beside her, hand on hers like a campaign promise. I hesitated. It's my design, my IP, my board. Why would we reassign it? Mother sipped her wine, placed the glass down with surgical precision, and smiled that smile she reserved for guests and difficult truths. You've always been more quiet, Eularia. Not everyone needs to be on stage to make impact. Conchi can beat Vitri Quamin Ladu. And like a fool, I believed them. I signed. The room exhaled in relief. I even remember Cimbria clapping softly, like I'd just donated bone marrow to the family legacy. Back in the present, I could trace the cost. First came the website redesigns, my name faded from bios. Then, emails routed through communications, Decisions, pending board review. My board, the one I founded. It wasn't theft, not legally. I gave it away, blindfolded by loyalty, gagged by the illusion of peace. I turned to my bookshelf and pulled down a stack of archived industry magazines. A 2020 issue of Women in Innovation caught my eye. Cimbria was on the cover, arms folded, headline bold. The face of future philanthropy. Inside, she credited her team's strategic vision and a family culture of excellence. There was a quote from Rolver, too. She's always had the instincts of a true brand builder. That was my blueprint. The more I flipped, the more I disappeared. I closed the magazine, set it beside the others, and stared at the pile. I wasn't mourning. I was mapping. Every omission, every misquote, every rebranded version of me, I started listing them. One tab became a folder. Legal backup. Another. Founding timeline. By midnight, I had 3. Ownership trail. Brand transfers. Design archives. I whispered into the quiet. You buried my name. I'm digging it back up. The filing felt mechanical at first, but as the pages stacked, I felt something shift. Not anger, not even bitterness. Just focus. I stood, stretched, and walked toward the cabinet in the corner, one I hadn't opened in years. Behind a stack of notebooks and a faded office plaque sat a sealed envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Grandfather's. I peeled it open carefully. Inside was a yellowing copy of the original funding agreement, my name signed in ink, not digital, real, undeniable. Tucked within it, a small card in his slanted script. Don't let anyone convince you that quiet means weak. The oak grows in silence. I held it for a moment, longer than I needed to. My eyes didn't water, but something inside me steadied. Then I picked up my phone and opened a new message. They forgot I kept the roots, but I never forgot how to grow. The sky hadn't fully brightened when I returned to the dock. Dew clung to the edge of the pier like it was trying to hold its breath. And there it was, my shoe, still there, still lying where it had fallen the night before, just past the rope line where Rolver had made his declaration to the crowd. I bent down slowly, fingers brushing over the leather. The scuff from the edge of the dock was still fresh. I didn't put it back on. I tucked it carefully into my bag. That would be the last time I left any part of myself behind in that family's mess. A short drive and a long silence later, I stepped into Orrin Thatch's cafe. He'd claimed the corner of a side street near the old college library and turned it into something that felt like it had existed before the city was even mapped. Books lined the walls. The furniture was mismatched. There was always jazz playing low enough to think to. He was already there, sipping black coffee out of a chipped cup. You look like you just buried a war crime, he said as I sat across from him. I think they'd call it tradition. He passed me a folded sheet. I opened it, an archived press release from 2 years ago, one of the Foundation's landmark partnerships. My name wasn't on it. I kept it, he said, because that's the moment they erased you. Not slowly, not discreetly, right there in print. I stared at the paper, then looked up. You've always been more careful with other people's dignity than your own, he added, not accusing, just observing. I didn't argue. That used to be wisdom. I think now it was fear. Fear of what? Disrupting the myth they needed to stay comfortable. Cimbria's the legacy, Rolver's the mouth, I was the function, easy to hide. He nodded. So, what now? I pulled out my tablet and laid it between us. A digital timeline glowed on the screen, each event pinned with a small red dot. Every time they removed my name, reassigned credit, bypassed decisions, scrubbed my face from a post, I logged it. He leaned in. Damn. I wasn't quiet, I said, scrolling. They just spoke over me. That afternoon, I wrote a letter. Short. Professional. It wasn't a threat. Just a summary of documented misuse, misappropriation of my name, likeness, foundation identity. I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and walked it across town myself to Cimbria's office. Her new suite was all glass and light and perfect angles. A receptionist took the envelope, but looked confused. Do you have an appointment? She'll understand what it's about, I said. Before I could leave, Cimbria appeared from a hallway. She saw me, then the envelope in the assistant's hand. "Oh," she said, tone clipped. "Is this about that shoe thing again?" I stepped toward her. "That shoe thing is going to be what people remember when they talk about how you lost everything." Her eyes narrowed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You mean like removing someone's name from their own company, or repackaging someone else's invention and calling it joint vision?" "Eularia," she said, voice dropping lower. "We're family." "No, you're marketing." "I was family. You turned me into a liability." I left without waiting for another word. Back at home, I opened LinkedIn and wrote a single sentence. "Silent founders don't stay silent forever. Watch this space." By the time I finished folding laundry, the post had over 3,000 views. Among the notifications was a familiar name. Rolver Stratton had liked it. Oren texted not long after. "You always had the power. This time, they'll hear you roar." I smiled and replied, "They'll hear what they left out." As I reached to close the app, my email pinged. Subject, Larkmore, reservation confirmation. Message, Captain Verrill here. "Are you confirming the reservation under your name again?" I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "Yes, this time, make sure it's my name in every ledger." I wasn't looking for trouble when I opened Cimbria's campaign site. I was just checking metrics, but trouble has a way of dressing itself in curated fonts and gold-trimmed branding. The slogan hit first, "Vision built on legacy." Then the images began sliding across the screen. Larkmore, my yacht, my office layout, my design, but not one trace of me. I paused at a photo, one I knew intimately. I remembered the day we staged it. I stood on the upper deck next to Cimbria, looking at the city skyline. We were both in navy, wind tousling our hair just right. It was supposed to represent unity, legacy, strength. Now the image showed only her. I wasn't cropped out delicately. I was removed, surgically, like a tumor. "They didn't just cut me out," I murmured. "They erased me." I took a screenshot and sent it to Oren without a caption. Seconds later, he replied, "Oren, that's your yacht, right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through the comments. "She's always been the visionary. Cimbria is everything a modern legacy needs. A true leader, unlike her sister." My thumb hovered over that last one longer than it should have. I opened a blank document, printed the campaign images, one by one. I laid them out across my workspace wall, like a crime scene. Then, beside each, I pinned the blueprints, original drafts, ownership contracts, receipts, a visual grid of truth. "They want a narrative?" I whispered. "Let me draft the real one." The next morning, I sent a message to Cimbria. "Me. Your team forgot to credit the architect again." It took her 15 minutes to respond. Cimbria. "Let's not make this public. You know how fragile your narrative is." That was all she wrote. I stared at her words and thought about all the times I'd been told to sit quiet for the good of the family. I replied, "Me. Then don't tempt me to make it louder." By midday, I updated my website. The homepage now included original design documents, contracts, old photos with timestamps. I kept the tone simple, no arrows, no accusations, just facts. I tagged each photo. Hatch original vision, Natch owned not borrowed. Within an hour, traffic doubled. By the third hour, a tech blog messaged, "Blog. Editor. You designed that yacht workspace, didn't you? The one in Cimbria's campaign?" Me. "Yes, and I still hold the IP." It didn't take long before people started asking questions. Some politely, some publicly. By late afternoon, a friend forwarded me a tweet. "Someone should tell Cimbria that legacy isn't a hand-me-down." The irony? Rolver had liked my LinkedIn post from 2 days ago without realizing what it meant. That was the thing about people like him. They were so used to seeing me as a non-threat, they didn't bother to read the subtext. That evening, I was reviewing a few final files when an email notification slid across my screen. Event Coordinator, Future Tech Forum. Subject, Keynote, Credit Confirmation. Hi Eularia, Cimbria's team requested exclusive billing for next week's joint keynote. Just confirming if we should remove your name from the program? I sat still, hands off the keyboard. Then I typed back, leave it. I'll be there. And then I opened the folder labeled, the lawsuit draft, Stratton violation. Some warnings are just a courtesy, some are weapons. I was reviewing contract clauses when the call came through. A familiar voice, courteous and cautious. Ms. Kincaid, this is Jordan from the Charleston Marina office. I just wanted to confirm, Stratton PR has booked Larkmore for their Vision Forward reception next Thursday evening. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Who authorized that? I asked, each word slow, deliberate. Well, the booking came under Cimbria Dorn. She noted that you'd approved it personally. I didn't respond immediately. The silence on the line stretched. Then I said, cancel it. Effective immediately. A pause. Would you like to send that in writing? You'll have it in 10 minutes. I ended the call, shut the laptop gently, and stood. They'd taken my silence for surrender. Again. The drive to the marina was uneventful, but my chest didn't settle until I pulled into the private lot near Dock B. As I stepped out, a steady breeze lifted the hem of my coat. I welcomed it. I wanted clarity as much as confrontation. The staff had already begun setting up, linen-covered tables, a portable bar, a media wall with Stratton Legacy Series printed across it in gold. It was my yacht, my property, and yet, I was walking into what looked like someone else's brand launch. A young man with a clipboard approached. Hi, this area is reserved for Stratton PR. I looked him in the eye. Let the system decide. Without waiting for more questions, I strode toward the biometric gate. My fingerprint pad glowed green before my heel hit the final step. The security lock clicked, and the gate slid open. Behind me, chairs stopped moving. Conversations paused. I could feel their eyes. I let them look. Inside, I walked the main deck calmly, past the set tables and branded centerpieces. A staff member stood beside a table covered in giveaways with Cimbria's logo on the tags. I didn't touch a thing. I didn't need to. Then I heard her voice, sharp, annoyed, close. You're making a scene. I turned. Cimbria stood in heels too high for her balance, phone in hand, jaw tight. No, I said, soft but sharp. You made an assumption. Rolver arrived seconds later, slipping between us with that disarming grin he wore like cologne. Eularia, he started, I think there's been a mix-up. You thought wrong, I cut in. This yacht is mine, legally, fully, no more borrowed prestige, and as of now, it's off limits. Cimbria scoffed. You're seriously going to pull ownership rank over a one-night event? I'm pulling accountability, I said. Your team used my assets, my name, and my history without permission. That ends now. Before either could reply, I turned and walked toward the captain's quarters. Verrill was there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line. Captain, I said, clear the event. Effective immediately. Any bookings under their name, cancel them. He nodded. Understood. It's good to have you back, Miss Kincaid. I lingered on the deck for a few more minutes. The staff began dismantling the setup quietly, Cimbria and Rolver standing like they couldn't decide whether to argue or retreat. I didn't care which they chose. As I stepped inside the cabin, my phone buzzed. Subject: unauthorized commercial use of trademarked property. Body: immediate response required. Our legal review confirms Stratton PR's usage of C. Foundation assets in violation of branding agreements. I looked out the window. The harbor was peaceful. Boats rocked slightly in the water like they hadn't just witnessed a declaration. Let's begin, I whispered. The envelope was thick, the kind you don't get by accident. It came by courier, signature required. The return address wasn't Stratton PR, it was their legal counsel. I opened it at the kitchen island, where my coffee had already gone cold. You are being accused of misrepresenting ownership and title related to the C Holdings brand. I read the sentence 3 times. They weren't just rewriting history. They were flipping the narrative and throwing it at me like a weapon. They were accusing me, of pretending to own what I'd built with my own hands. For a moment, I stood still, not shaken, calculating. They're using my name against me, I said aloud, just to hear how absurd it sounded. 3 days later, I walked into a boardroom on the 17th floor of a downtown conference center, face composed, notes in hand. The room buzzed with faux concern and strategic smiles. A damage control meeting, they'd called it. To fix the optical confusion caused by the yacht cancellation and social media fallout. Cimbria arrived late. Of course. She made her entrance in pale gray, carrying herself like royalty, completely untouched by scandal. She didn't acknowledge me, just nodded to the coordinator and took her seat like she'd rehearsed it. The presentation began. Slide after slide of numbers, forecasts, campaign recaps. And then, the branding slide. Chairwoman, Cimbria Dorn. There it was, in 36-point font, centered. The whole room turned to me. I didn't blink. I stood, walked calmly to the side table, plugged in my flash drive, and replaced the slide on screen with my own. Trademark registration, board meeting notes with my signature. Corporate founding documents, the Larkmore yacht deed, stamped and notarized, and at the bottom, one line in bold. Chairwoman, Eularia Kincaid. Silence. Not the respectful kind, the oh hell kind. Cimbria's smile didn't break, but her fingers tapped the table edge a beat too fast. After the meeting, Rolver caught me near the elevators. He spoke in that gentle knife voice he reserved for delicate manipulation. Look, Eularia, we just thought, publicly, it would be cleaner. Better for presentation, you know. Optics. I laughed, short and sharp. I am not a background aesthetic in your photo op, Rolver. My name is the equity. Without it, you don't even exist on paper. He dropped the charm, eyes flat. Why are you making this so hard? I'm not. You are. Because you're pretending I didn't build the foundation you're standing on. Later that day, Stratton PR launched their counter-strike, a slick microsite, timelines revised, key contributions blurred or reassigned. Quotes taken out of context. Cimbria became the face of innovation. I was cast as the transitional legacy, a quiet benefactor who'd graciously handed over the reins. Oren called. They're betting you won't go public, he said. They think you'll stay classy. They're confusing class with quiet, I answered, and they're about to learn the difference. I didn't wait. That night, my lawyer fired off a cease and desist to Stratton PR and their affiliated sponsors. It included time-stamped documents, archived data, signed agreements, IP tracking, and a full revenue trail. We also filed an injunction request to block use of Seagun holdings in any promotional materials, pending review. They weaponized my silence, I told Oren over tea. Let's turn the volume up. 2 days later, Captain Varel texted me from the marina. A photo. The staff directory printout inside the main cabin of the Larkmore. There it was, freshly mounted. Chairwoman, Cimbria Dorn. I stared at it. They were still playing with the wrong name. I opened my computer, clicked into the legal drive, and selected a file I hadn't touched in 3 years. Board transfer reversal, emergency motion. Some crowns are borrowed. This one? I built it nail by nail. The moment I stepped through the entrance of the Civic Pavilion, I could feel it, the tension disguised as sophistication, glittering lights, champagne flutes tilted just right, and Cimbria's logo stitched on every napkin like a crown no one questioned. Her banners were everywhere, hanging like declarations of war made in cursive. I wore navy, structured, no entourage, no assistant, no flash, just purpose. People glanced. Some nodded, some looked away, the way you do when you're not sure if someone's famous or just familiar. I spotted former investors, a few clients, even a couple of our high school teachers who'd clearly been invited for nostalgia optics. They still think the show belongs to her, I murmured. While everyone rushed toward the open bar or clustered near Cimbria's PR team, I moved to the side hallway. There, the catering staff lined up in pressed shirts, visibly exhausted already. I approached the head server, a woman named Denise I'd seen before. Ma'am? she asked hesitantly. Just Eularia, I said. Listen, at the end of the night, I've arranged for you and your entire team to have full access to the VIP suite for dinner. No cameras, no rush. She blinked, stunned. Seriously? I nodded. Seriously, no one works behind the curtain without eating like the stars. By the time I returned to the main hall, the whispers had started. Quiet ones, behind trays. The kind that spread faster than a headline. She's not like the others, one of them said. I heard it. I was meant to. The keynote began 20 minutes later. Cimbria walked up to the stage in a gown that probably had its own agent. She smiled wide, arms open like a preacher with a product. She spoke smoothly. Too smoothly. Until it happened. From the audience, a man raised his hand. Not a heckler, not a stranger. The CEO of Kroll Tech. A big deal. Before you continue, he said gently, standing, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Eularia Kincaid's pioneering work in this space. Many of us in this room know the truth behind the structure we admire. Cimbria froze mid-sentence. Eyes darted toward me, a few claps, then more, not explosive, just respectful, but devastating. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Later, during mingling, a guest approached Cimbria by the media wall. I've always admired the yacht's interior layout, she said. Was that your design? Cimbria hesitated. It was. A family collaboration. Another voice chimed in behind her. I believe that was Ms. Kincaid's innovation, yes? Cimbria turned to me, tight-lipped. I stepped forward, calm. The truth doesn't need a team, I said. It just needs time. After that, the energy shifted. An old investor walked over, glass in hand. I pulled out of Stratton's bid last month, he said. I was waiting to see this side of you. Another one followed, then a third. They weren't loud, just steady. Like tidewater returning to its rightful path. I thanked them all, politely, but I kept my gaze focused, not triumphant, just rooted. As I moved toward the exit, the event manager intercepted me. Ms. Kincaid, he said, clipboard in hand, we're already scheduling next quarter's leadership series. Would you like us to add your name to the speaker list? Before I could respond, I saw Cimbria across the ballroom, watching. And then she stormed out, stilettos snapping against tile like punctuation. I didn't follow. I just smiled. I'll send them something worth listening to. The silence that greeted me on the deck of the Larkmoor the next morning felt heavier than the cheers from the night before. The tablecloths had been removed, the stage lights taken down. All that remained was the smell of ocean air and the faint impression of heels pressed into the wood floor where people had once stood, clapping for the wrong name. I walked barefoot across the boards, coffee in one hand, the other brushing the rail. For once, there were no clicks of cameras, no phones recording behind someone's wineglass. Just me, the sea, and the truth that had finally taken up residence again. Their silence today speaks louder than their cheers last night. I found the invitation tucked under the windshield of my car after breakfast. Stratton PR had printed new materials, another event scheduled for the following month. Or so they thought. I showed the card to Verrill before he could ask. They can't use the space, I said plainly. He didn't argue. They don't hold the keys anymore. A few hours later, the marina's reservation directory was updated. Not a ceremony, no need for fanfare. Private use only. Eularia Kincaid. I didn't smile. It wasn't about celebration. It was about correction. Back inside the cabin, I opened a storage chest I hadn't touched since moving the yacht office on board. Beneath a few old notebooks and a collection of keepsakes was a cloth-wrapped bundle. I knew the weight before I saw it, the brown leather shoes. Next to them, I placed my mother's vintage heels, black, pointed, scuffed on the sole where she used to rock nervously during meetings. She gave them to me during my first board presentation. They walked me through every room where no one held the door, she had whispered, and I made sure I never asked them to. I stared at both pairs now, side by side, separated by decades but identical in purpose. Cimbria never knew that story, never cared to. Across town, the internet buzzed like a hive. A photo of me sitting calmly while the CEO acknowledged my work had gone semi-viral. Someone captioned it, "Legacy speaks without shouting." Another added, #legacy. Not loud. It didn't take long before someone posted the side-by-side comparison. Cimbria's campaign photo with me cropped out, next to the original one from years ago. And just like that, the narrative turned itself around. This time, no scandal, no press releases, just truth doing what it always does when you give it room. A call came in from a magazine I'd admired for years. "We'd like to feature your story, Eularia. No family tie-ins, just you." I paused. "I'll agree on one condition," I said. "No edits, no rebranding of facts. You run it as it happened, as I lived it." There was a quiet laugh on the other end. "That's why we called." That night, back in my suite, a courier arrived. No name, no return label. Inside the envelope was a printed photo of our family's gala from 10 years ago. I remembered the moment, everyone lined up under a huge banner welcoming the guests. My name wasn't on it. On the back, scribbled in handwriting I recognized too well, were the words, "You weren't supposed to take the spotlight, just hold it for us." No signature. But it didn't need one. I folded the photo slowly, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it in. The flames didn't need coaxing. They took it quickly, and I walked out into the night. They thought I was their placeholder. I was always the blueprint. The envelope slid across the table without a sound. No threats, no shouting, just wait. I looked at my lawyer, who nodded once. "This puts you back where you always belonged." Inside was the final notice, printed on firm stock, every line measured, every word drafted with precision, no emotion, just consequence. Final notice. Legal counsel will follow. I signed my name slowly, no flourish. I didn't need one. That afternoon, I sat in the makeup chair at the Charleston Media Studio, but asked them not to touch my face. "Just smooth the hair," I told them. "Let the rest speak." The interviewer peeked in through the curtain, offering a smile too cautious to be genuine. "Still want to do this?" "This time," I said, adjusting my collar. "I just have to remember the facts. The truth needs no edits." I wore the same brown shoes they once called embarrassing, the same ones that touched the marble of that dock. I wasn't wearing them to make a point. I wore them because they belonged to me. A producer tapped my shoulder gently. "There's something you might want to see before we start." He handed me a tablet. The screen played a grainy clip, audio from backstage at Stratton's last event. Rulver's voice came first. "As long as she doesn't talk, we control the room." Then Cimbria, biting and dry. "She's the name behind the paper. We're the faces they want." There was a pause, then laughter. Small, smug. The clip ended. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My hands rested on my lap, fingers steady. We began filming 5 minutes later. The interview wasn't a bombshell. It was a dissection. Calm, clear, detailed. I laid out contracts, displayed board filings, shared screenshots, receipts, video clips of the early days when I was drafting the Larkmoor's layout on my living room floor. They didn't interrupt. They didn't need to. Toward the end, I looked into the camera and said, "When you try to erase someone who built the table you're sitting at, eventually the table folds." The clip aired the next day. They called it measured fury. Others called it elegant annihilation. What I noticed was the silence. Stratton PR canceled their keynote appearance the following week. Cimbria's firm released no statement, no apology, just stillness. One by one, investors quietly pulled out. Sponsors disappeared from event listings. A director from Cimbria's parent firm stepped down. There were no headlines about it, just a disappearance of logos, one by one. And in that silence came the reckoning. That night, when I returned to my apartment, there was a cream-colored envelope waiting at the door. No postage, just a folded note inside. "They're saying you won," it read. "But all I see is you standing alone." I flipped the card over. My mother's handwriting. The envelope was thick with weight and thinner than warmth. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, impeccable cursive, stiff and calculated, an invitation, masked as reconciliation. We invite you to join us for a family restoration luncheon, Saturday, 1:00 p.m., Kincaid Estate. No apology, no sentiment, just date, time, location, like it was a corporate calendar request. I read it twice, not out of confusion, out of habit. They always wanted me to show up, never to speak. I didn't respond. I just showed up. The estate hadn't changed, still framed by trimmed hedges that looked like they had better health insurance than most people. The gravel crunched under my flats as I stepped out of the car. I didn't wear navy this time. I wore gray, neutral, undistracting, forgettable. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been when I left it. Furniture arranged like we never had arguments. Smells of lemon polish and fresh lilies, Glendora's idea of welcoming. Her version of affection had always come in scent and silence. Then the hallway. The family wall hadn't grown. It had shifted. The portraits were bigger. Cimbria now took up 3 panels, 2 covers of national magazines, and 1 quote engraved in brass. Vision isn't inherited, it's embodied. Rolver's face appeared twice, once in a Forbes pullout and another shaking hands with a mayor. And me? Not even a whisper. I walked the entire hallway, not fast, not bitter, just observant. I didn't need their frame. I became my own canvas. The lunch was served on the back veranda. 8 seats. Only 6 occupied. Cimbria wasn't one of them. My father, sitting at the head of the table as always, began talking the moment I sat down. Something about media misinterpretation. The press overplays conflict, he said. They twist the details. Glendora didn't look at me. Instead, she offered her usual mid-lunch compliment. "You've kept your skin lovely, dear." A cousin mumbled something about being glad I was back. I smiled politely. I was never gone, just finally seen. They didn't know what to do with that, so they ate. After dessert, my father cleared his throat and leaned forward with a voice polished like a retirement speech. "We were hoping you might consider rejoining the family initiative. Come back into the fold." I sipped my water before answering. "There is no fold," I said. "There is a fortress. And I built mine brick by brick, out of everything you left behind." Glendora's smile faltered for the first time. "We didn't mean to forget you, Eularia." "No. You meant to replace me quietly. There's a difference." The rest of lunch was chewed in silence. I didn't slam doors when I left. I didn't say goodbye. I walked the long gravel path to my car, passing the old oak swing in the yard, the one I used to sit on during grown-up dinners where I wasn't invited. I remembered rocking gently on that swing in a Sunday dress while the house behind me echoed with wine glasses and laughter. I wasn't mad at the memory. I was done with it. I looked back at the house once. It didn't look smaller. I just didn't need it to be big anymore. Back home, the evening sun had dipped low across the water. The sky burned in slow oranges, casting long shadows on the floor of my living room. My phone buzzed. A text from Oren. I read the magazine piece. They finally printed the truth. Attached was a photo. A university tech center unveiling a new donor wall. The Kincaid Wing for Independent Innovation, founded by Eularia Kincaid. I let myself smile. Then another notification popped up, an email from Cimbria's assistant. She'd like to meet, alone, no press. I didn't open it right away. I stared out the window a little longer, the sound of the tide brushing up against the dock below. Maybe they still see alone as a weakness. I've always seen it as space to build. The auditorium was packed, but the only sound was shoes on polished floor. Mine. I walked onto the stage slowly, not dramatically, not timidly, just aware. The banner behind me stretched across the screen in soft lighting. Independent Legacy, the builders who weren't named. I scanned the audience briefly. They weren't looking for Cimbria anymore. She was there, near the back, no entourage this time, just a gray shawl and lowered sunglasses. And for once, she didn't own the room. She didn't even try. I stood in front of the podium and adjusted the mic. I was told once that I didn't belong on the yacht, that I was embarrassing the family by showing up in brown shoes, I began, voice steady. But here's the truth. I wasn't the guest. I was the yacht. Laughter. Warm. Not mocking. I told my story, not with bitterness, not with scandal, but with ownership, the boards I'd designed, the classrooms we'd funded, the kids who'd learned to code in cities the family never even visited. I didn't mention names. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. The room didn't shift in tension. It melted into recognition. When I finished, people stood. The applause wasn't explosive. It was sustained. Quiet strength. After the speech, a few reporters circled me. But the questions weren't about my sister or the headlines. They were about structure, longevity, what I'd do next. One asked, "What made you keep going, even when they erased you?" I smiled. They never erased me. They just never saw what I was building. As I turned to leave, a young woman approached shyly. "Ms. Kincaid," she said, holding out a note. I took it, folded, handwritten. I read it quietly. "You taught me silence isn't always defeat. Thank you for showing someone like me that we can take up space, even if they pretend we're not in the room." She looked down, unsure. I was one of the scholarship kids. From Memphis. I hugged her. No cameras, no press. "You didn't need my name on a plaque to matter," I said, "but I'm proud to know you carry it forward." Outside, the wind had picked up. I wasn't rushing. I had nowhere to be but exactly where I chose. Cimbria was waiting by the service entrance. Alone. She didn't speak right away. Her lips trembled when she did. "I want to apologize," she said. I was scared of not being enough." I nodded. "You were enough, Cimbria, until you stepped on me to climb higher." She inhaled, shaky. "Can we talk again? Maybe even work together, if there's space?" I didn't hesitate. "I'll support your healing," I said, "but not your return." Back on the Larkmoor, I stood at the edge of the rooftop deck, the harbor gold beneath the sunset. A call had just come in, another investor. The nonprofit was expanding to 20 more states. The calendar was full through next year, and yet I stood still, letting the evening hold me. I thought of my mother's handwriting, of my father's silences, of the way Cimbria's shadow had stretched until I forgot how bright I could be. They gave me nothing, and that became my power. Inside, the final wall was finished. Walnut, clean lines, spotlit gently. A single name was engraved in gold. Eularia Kincaid. Founder, architect, unapologetic. I didn't just reclaim what was mine, I rewrote what mine means. Because sometimes, the quietest one in the room owns the building.